Hey guys, it's Paradise, and the Switch Axe in Monster Hunter Wilds has received numerous changes, additions, and overall feels a little different, but in all the right ways. It's always good to know how different weapons function even if they aren't your main, so you can work around your fellow hunters during a hunt. So let's get a bit of a deeper look into what the Switch Axe brings in Monster Hunter Wilds. Do tell us below what changes in Wilds or weapons you would like us to cover next, and do remember, Capcom have restricted us to only using 20 minutes of our own recording across everything, so we will be using other sources of Switch Axe gameplay, from the weapon preview to Japanese Gamescom coverage, and more, so we can show you as many of these moves as we can. Let's start it off with one of the biggest and coolest new additions, the full release slash and the compressed slash. These are kind of reminiscent of the compressed finishing discharge in Rise and Sunbreak, being a somewhat similar Beyblade spin style attack that returns in Wilds, so let's go through what they both do. The element discharge finisher is back when using triangle and circle during sword mode, and tapping triangle will prolong the duration of the move until the explosion at the end. However, after this, you now have two options depending on if your amp gauge is filled or not, which is the red blade visual on the right side of the Switch Axe UI. If you are fully amped and this gauge is fully red and glowing, you can hold R2 after your element discharge, or just hold R2 and press triangle circle to do the full released slash. This move will charge for a moment and go into a series of spinning slash attacks against the target in front of you, ending with an additional explosion, and in the in-game notes it does say that you end in sword mode, but from my testing it always looked like it ended in axe mode. This does a massive amount of damage with quite impressive visuals, and it does chonk your switch gauge quite a lot. Alternatively, if you aren't fully amped or don't want to commit to the full charge, then you can go into a compressed slash instead. This is a much quicker and shorter version of the move, and its input will be to tap R2 after element discharge, or just tap R2 with triangle circle to go into compressed slash. This move will end and put you into axe mode, and I believe both of these moves have some kind of hyper armor, which is obviously nice given that they leave you wide open, but you can still take damage. Do take note that despite the actual visuals of the damage number, it does state that while amped, you will deal small explosions based on your current file type in sword mode as before, and we actually know the file types that we'll have access to, which includes power, elemental, poison, paralysis, dragon, and exhaust. After this, we need to talk about the new offset attack and counter that the Switch Axe has received, which is a real game changer and allows us to remain even more aggressive without so much fear of punishment. To start with, we have the offset attack, which is available only in axe mode. Our rising slash is now offset rising slash, and this is the same input of triangle and circle in axe mode. But if you time this attack as a monster is about to hit you, you will offset them in a similar way to timing a perfect guard or parry. Connecting this to a monster will give off a satisfying ding, reduce the amount of damage that you take, and grant you a chunk of your switch gauge and send the monster flying back, where you then charge forwards towards them, doing a similar animation to Rise's Invincible Gambit. This is the follow-up attack to the offset when you land it perfectly. You can also cancel out of this with a dodge roll, or follow it up with a combo with a morph rising double slash with R2, or a heavy slam with triangle or circle, which will also grant you power axe mode, which we'll talk about soon. The goodness doesn't end there though, as while you're in sword mode, after any triangle attack and possibly any circle attack or combo string, you can kind of cancel into the new counter rising slash with R2 and triangle. This puts you into a readied kind of counter state for a second, and if you're hit during this time, you will take reduced damage, it will fill your switch gauge, and you'll do a couple of slashes on the monster that lets you combo directly into Heaven's Ward Flurry. Having both an offset in axe mode and a counter in sword mode allows us to have more responses to what the monster's doing, no matter the situation at hand, so you have a way to tackle incoming attacks now with the offset attack, the counter, and of course our standard dodges. Next up, I wanted to confirm that ZeroSum Discharge is returning in the game. It functions pretty much the same as before, except the initial input now requires you to hold down triangle and circle, and then after that you'll latch onto the monster, and you can rapidly press triangle to prolong it. I've tested this myself in the demo, although I don't have capture, and this does work from grounded where you latch onto the monster as explained before, but the wording here does make it sound like there might be a second way to do it while mounted on the monster, but more testing is needed. We also have to highlight the new mount finisher, which is so stylish. Your weapon attacks while mounted with the axe will actually fill your switch gauge, so if you're low on gauge, this will be a great way to top up. The finisher, however, plunges the sword mode version into the monster, doing a quick zero-sum style saw attack into a big element discharge, which also destroys wounds for extra damage. Now let's touch on Power Axe mode, because this will not only increase your axe damage, but now will also increase the fill rate of your switch gauge while attacking. You can get Power Axe mode in a variety of ways. You can do the classic wild swing attack and then press triangle to do a heavy slam, but now you only need to do 2 wild swings instead of 3, and you can dodge out of it. Heavy Slam can also be accessed after offsetting a monster with your offset rising slash to gain Power Axe mode, and it can be gained through the axe version of the Focus Strike. So let's talk about the Focus Strike too. By holding L2 for focus mode and pressing R1, you can execute Focus Morph Slash when hitting a red wound. Remember, wounds are passively created when attacking certain parts of monsters. The Switch Axe actually has a few versions depending on if you're in Axe or Sword mode and if you want to morph afterwards. In Axe or Sword mode, it will start by doing a series of rapid swings on the monster. If you are in Axe mode, you can end it with a heavy slam granting you Power Axe mode, or press R2 to morph into Sword mode and immediately do an elemental discharge finisher. If you are in Sword mode, you can stay in Sword mode and execute the elemental discharge finisher, or morph into Axe mode and end with a heavy slam. So you have a lot of options on how to start and finish the Focus Strike, but the elemental discharge finisher is probably the higher damaging option. Let's touch on the gauges real quick too. The switch gauge will no longer replenish automatically, but I believe it still does if it's sheathed, so if you're in combat it will just not regenerate automatically over time. You need to hit things in Axe mode to build it up, or you can reload it when below the 30% gauge marker as in previous games. Remember that Power Axe mode will now increase the fill rate of your switch gauge, so keeping this up will be important to balance between the modes and balancing your switch gauge. The Amped state, once triggered, will not only power up your sword hits with small file explosions as said before, but also grant you some small switch gauge refill. Outside of this, there's a couple new variations of moves, including the alternative new draw attack. The Fade Slash seems to be a bit faster too, and you can morph attack without any previous attack or roll, and there's likely more. So the Switch Axe is looking particularly spicy this time around with extra flashy finishers, a built-in counter and offset attack, some new or faster moves, and overall is an absolute beast to play. So what new feature or weapon would you like us to go over next? Tell us down below and make sure you're subscribed for more Monster Hunter and videos on your favorite games coming very, very soon.